welcome back to another episode of Addicted to Gear. Thank you for joining me once again. Today's big news comes from the world of Fender. It looks like the thunder has been stolen from Fender's announcement that they're going to be launching a brand new series of guitars called the Parallel Universe Series. And now these guitars are a brand new line that no one has seen before, and I believe Fender was intending to launch all of these guitars at the Winter NAMM show, which is just around the corner. Now, unfortunately, somebody messed up and leaked some images and information about the new line of guitars ahead of time. And of course, bad news for Fender, good news for us, right? We get to see what they're planning for us ahead of the game. Now, for those of you who don't know, the NAMM event is the biggest trade show event for any kind of manufacturers of musical instruments, and Fender's been attending this for years and years. We learned this year that Gibson has decided to sit this one out, and that caused a lot of stir in the industry as well. We talked about that in a previous video, and you can check that one out. But today we're really excited to take a look at what this Parallel Universe series is all about. Now, as far as we know, and we don't have all the information yet because this is just information that I can share with you through what we know through the leaked information. So we know that there's going to be at least 5 different models, and they're called the Parallel Universe model. And that's an interesting name because when you look at them, you'll understand that there's something that, you know, they're basically taking elements from all the different guitars that they've created so far and kind of reconfiguring them, or basically making a mashup of different elements from different guitars to introduce this brand new line. And I think that's an interesting idea because although they're new guitars and they're completely different, they're not going to be shocking to us because we've already seen a lot of different elements from all these guitars as well. So they're kind of strangely familiar to us. So they're introducing parts from the Jaguar, from the Telecaster and the Stratocaster and all the other kinds of guitars that they've had there. And they're just mixing and matching different elements, which I think is a really cool idea from Fender. And we're going to be taking a look at these models in a minute and discussing them individually in more detail. So stay tuned for that. But what I wanted to say off the bat is I think that Fender is doing an excellent job of marketing themselves and staying relevant in today's world. They're not just reintroducing guitars and changing the colors or changing the type of pickups that are inside. They're actually trying to give us more value. The prices are going up like everyone else's prices, but they're still trying to stay relevant in today's world and give us something new. And I think they're on the right track with this. I think there will be a few people that will not like it, and purists that are strictly Stratocaster, Telecaster, Jaguar. But there's going to be a lot of us and the new generation of players that are going to embrace these new models. So let's have a look at what they're all about and discuss them in more detail. One more thing, there's also been another model that was leaked even earlier, and this is also a limited edition, and it's the Fender Meteora guitar. And the Meteora is, I think, the most unique new guitar that's being launched this year by Fender. It's quite interesting overall, and we're going to be talking about that as well when we look at the guitars in more detail. So let's take a look at that right now. Let's not waste any time. Let's jump into it and take a look at what they're all about. So the first guitar in the lineup is the Fender Limited Edition Jaguar Strat. So what do we know about this guitar? Offhand, just by looking at it, we can tell that it has a Strat body, Strat neck, but it does have those Jaguar influenced elements to it, hence the name Jaguar Strat. Now, what we don't see offhand is the fact that it does have a nitro cellulose lacquer paint finish, which I dig. I really do like the nitro guitars, and if I have an option of buying a poly finished guitar or a nitro finished guitar, I'll go for the nitro every single time. Yes, the poly is more durable, it lasts longer, but it doesn't age as well. Eventually you're going to drop that guitar, you're going to ding it. There's nothing more unsightly than a chip on a poly finish that's just missing from your guitar. It's a thick chunky piece of paint that's missing. Whereas nitro is very thin, and when it does ding, and it is more delicate for sure, but it just ages more gracefully. It wears and ages like an old pair of jeans, which I really do love. Now, other than the alder body and the nitro paint finish, it will have a 25.5 scale length, and will have a rosewood board with 22 tall, narrow frets. And the neck on this guitar will have a deeper C shape to it. So it will lend itself to more of a vintage vibe, a vintage, a thicker, chunkier neck. I like the deep C necks more than I like the typical like modern C ones. And beyond that, what we know is that it's going to be loaded with a set of American vintage 65 Jaguar single coil pickups in it. So the pickups are 3 individual Jaguar pickups. It doesn't have the slanted bridge pickup that you would normally find in a Stratocaster. I would have liked to have seen that though. I would have thought that would have been maybe a cool element to add into the guitar. The guitar does have a lot of switches. It does have, the switches on the upper horn that is very typical to a Jaguar. It does have a regular toggle switch on the lower side, right underneath the pickups. I'm not really a big fan of where that pickup toggle switch is located, just because I feel that it might be in the way when you're strumming. Now, since it's parallel to the ground, if you hit it, you probably won't switch it accidentally to another pickup, but still kind of a weird place for me anyway. I'm not a big fan of the location. It does have the elements of chrome and plastic pickguard that is very typical to a Jaguar Strat. Now, one of the things that I really don't like about the Jaguar, I never really did like it, is the bridge and the way the actual bridge and tremolo arm mechanism work on this guitar. I've never found a Jaguar that actually stays in tune properly, and to be dropping a lot of money on a new modern guitar that has kind of the same vintage defects, if you want to call it that, to what was originally that Jaguar bridge. I don't know, it doesn't give me that warm and fuzzy feeling inside. I don't think I'd actually drop money on this model out of the bunch. I think this is one of the least likely ones that I'd be buying from the new lineup. But I'm sure a lot of you will like that and love the Jaguar, and will find it very interesting to have that Strat body on the Jaguar appointments that it's introducing. So next in the lineup is the Fender limited edition Troublemaker Tele. Now, the first thing I really like about this guitar is the name. I love the name Troublemaker Tele. Now, the thing is, to me, what makes a Tele is the guitar shape of the body and the neck. Now, obviously, this is not a Telecaster neck. It's a typical Fender large headstock Strat neck. So, they are taking elements from other types of guitar designs, but what we see really apparently in this guitar model is the fact that they're taking a lot of influences from Gibson. Now, why do I say that? Well, first of all, the body itself is made out of mahogany, and it has a maple top in it. So it basically is very similar to what we'd see on a Gibson Les Paul. The guitar has a deep C mahogany neck, again with the deep C design. I think Fender understands that they want to go with a little bit more of a vintage flair to their necks. And I like the deep C neck a lot. I prefer it over the modern C. But the fact that it's made out of mahogany as opposed to maple, again, lends me to see where they're taking the elements from the Gibson influenced guitars there. Now, there's 2 humbuckers on this, and of course they've had humbuckers on Telecaster style guitars before. That's really not anything too new, but it's maybe a little bit less common for people that are looking for that Telecaster sound. You're not going to really get it with the humbuckers. So you have that Telecaster body, the feel of a Telecaster, but the sound really is not going to be very Telecaster, if you know what I mean. Now, the other thing is that they're putting in a bridge system here that, again, is lending itself very much to what you would find in a Gibson style guitar. So Gibson uses a two-nomatic bridge, while Fender's introduced this bridge, which they call the Judo-matic, which is, you know, very, very similar in design. Nothing too new there. We've seen that a million times on Gibson guitars. It's got 22 frets on it, a rosewood fingerboard, has a three-way switch on the upper horn, and the pick guard on this reminds me a little bit of the Carbonita guitars that they've introduced in the past. It has a 4-knob layout, so I guess you have 2 tone and 2 volume knobs on this guitar. Again, very similar to what you would find on a Gibson Les Paul. And if that wasn't enough, it is offered in a combination of a sunburst finish as opposed to a standard opaque finish. And because you do have the binding on both, obviously, you know, it's a tip of the hat, I think, to a lot of the Gibson influenced guitars. Now, the cool thing of this on this guitar is if you do want to have a really nice chunky sounding guitar, I think the mahogany with the humbucker pickups is going to sound killer, along with the mahogany neck as well. It should be really cool. I mean, a very interesting guitar for sure. The only thing I would have liked to have seen on this guitar would be a regular 6 saddle bridge, an adjustable bridge that you would normally see on, you know, a regular Strat, or maybe a more of like a G&L style kind of a bridge to it or something like that. I think that would have been, I would have definitely been interested in buying a guitar if it did have that appointment. But with the two-nomatic style bridge, I'm not a big fan of that type of layout on a Strat or a Fender type guitar. So we'll see what how that works in terms of how well it sells when it's out in the public. The next one we're looking at is the Fender Limited Edition Jazz Tele. Now, the Jazz Tele is very different from the Telemaster style guitar. It's basically a Telecaster shaped Jazzmaster. You know, people do like the Jazzmaster. They sold well in the past. Again, for me, and this is just my opinion, I'm not a big fan of the actual bridge on these guitars. And again, I don't see myself dropping this kind of money for a guitar that has a bridge like that. I think that's maybe one of the mistakes that they've made. I understand that they do want to keep that Jazzmaster influence there for people who do like the Jazzmaster. But for me, that's kind of a negative aspect. Now, the cool thing on this one is that it does have an ash body, will have a maple neck with a rosewood fretboard on it, and it does come loaded with a set of pure vintage 65 Jazzmaster pickups. So basically, very similar in terms of electronics and layouts to what you would see on a Jazzmaster. The place they put the toggle switch, the 3-way toggle switch, again, it could cause problems when you're strumming. It's kind of in the way. I would have preferred to have seen that on the upper horn as opposed to the lower horn. Other than that, I mean, the neck is typical Strat. It has the spaghetti Fender Strat logo on it, which I do like a lot better than say what we just saw on the Troublemaker Tele, which was more of a made in Mexico type Fender logo. And this one is also going to be offered in 2 colors. You're going to have an Olympic white version, and you're also going to have the sunburst version. So you're going to have 2 different colors available there for people that do want to have a little bit of choice. It's always really nice to have some choice. And almost all of the guitars in this lineup are going to have some kind of a vintage tint to the headstock. In this particular case, you can see it's like more of an amber color as opposed to the one that we just looked at, which is a Troublemaker Tele, which is kind of a little bit darker because it is made out of mahogany as opposed to maple. So down the line, we're looking at one of the more interesting ones, in my opinion. It's the Fender Limited Edition Whiteguard Strat. And when I first saw this guitar, my head hurt. I thought I was gonna have like a seizure because it was like, it's a Strat but it's not a Strat. You know, it's a Telecaster, but it's not a Telecaster. So what the hell is it? So basically, this guitar to me is a guitar for those of you who love Telecasters, but don't like the ergonomics of the Telecaster body. Everyone knows that the Telecaster body is a little bit more crude. It's a little bit chunkier. It's not as refined. The edges are not rolled. It doesn't have a tummy tuck or an armrest on it. So for all of you that really wanted to have the comfort of a Telecaster, but in sort of a Stratocaster model or body, here it is. So the Whiteguard Strat is basically taking a Strat and a Telecaster and merging them together. It comes with a vintage blonde finish on it, which I find is really cool, very retro looking. It's got a single ply white pickguard that is a nod of the hat to, you know, a typical Telecaster, and it comes loaded with a pair of custom shop 51 no-caster pickups, which should be killer in terms of tone. I think it will sound very twangy. Everything else about this guitar is very Telecaster. You know, the switch is Telecaster, three-way Telecaster switch, two knobs. Bridge is exactly like a Telecaster. You have the three bridges that are brass, string through body design. The input jack is on the edge of the body as opposed to the top of the body that you would normally see in a Strat. So it's very much a Telecaster meets Strat ergonomics. I think it's going to sell extremely well. Next on the lineup, we have the limited edition Strat Telecaster hybrid, which is kind of the inverse of what we just saw. It basically is now taking a Strat and putting it on a Telecaster body. So really, Fender is giving you everything you could possibly imagine, everything you could possibly want. You know, for all you guys that have been customizing your guitars to kind of get the models that are not currently available from Fender, it's almost like Fender has been reading the forums and saying, hey, you know, let's put a Strat on a Telecaster body, let's put a Telecaster on a Strat body, and they're launching all these new crazy hybrid models here, and I'm sure a lot of people will actually be pretty happy with them. Now, this particular model, to me, I would be more likely to buy the Whiteguard Strat as opposed to the Strat Telecaster hybrid. I don't know. I mean, if I buy a guitar that has a Telecaster body to it, I kind of expect that Telecaster sound to go along with it, and it's really I don't see a reason to put a more clunky body on a Strat. I think the Strat body is perfect the way it is. It's comfortable. It's almost like I'm taking away something from the Strat by putting on a body that is a Telecaster shape. It doesn't really give you anything more, in my opinion. It doesn't give you any kind of Telecaster sound. So to actually call this a Telecaster, I don't know. I think it's a little bit of a stretch. You know, if they would have put maybe only two Telecaster style pickups on this one, I would say, okay, yeah, I get Telecaster nuance, but in this particular case, I don't know. Again, one of the models that I'm not really crazy about. It's going to have an ash body. It's going to have a maple neck on it. It's pretty odd looking in my opinion, but hey, you know, to each his own. I'm sure there's some people out there that will like this model regardless of what I'm saying, but to me, I don't know. Basically, you're taking all the appointments of a Strat and you're putting it on a Telecaster body, and that's pretty much what you get with this one. Next in the lineup, I think the limited edition Thin Line Super Deluxe that we have here is probably the version of the new model line that you would buy if you want attention. Why do I say that? Because it definitely has a lot of bling to it. I mean, the color, you know, you have like a bright orange here. You have a sparkly silver pickguard on it. You have the big block inlays on the neck, the Filtertron style pickups, the F-hole, the binding. I mean, this thing just screams like, look at me kind of thing. I don't know if I particularly like the guitar just basically based on looks alone. It could sound killer. I mean, since it is hollow. It does have an F hole in it, and it, you know, could be pretty light. Beyond that, though, I don't know. I don't know if I could get beyond the bling. If it was offered maybe in different colors that would be less blingy, I might feel compelled to try it or buy it. But I'm not a big fan of the big block inlays either. I think, you know, I'm kind of used to seeing the dot inlays on the Fender type guitars. So it's kind of weird to be able to all of a sudden see the big block inlays on it. But I mean, it could be a killer guitar, you know, fret markers aside. There's not a lot of detail on this one at the moment, but it definitely, I mean, I'd be curious to try it just to see. The Filtertron combination pickups with a hollow body guitar could be pretty cool, but offhand, I just can't get past the looks of this one. Last but not least, we have the limited edition Meteora. And this one, to me, is a pretty cool looking guitar. Definitely not anything like we've seen before. You know, beyond the shape of the headstock and the fact that it is using Telecaster style pickups in it, and a bridge that slightly resembles a Telecaster bridge. Everything else about this guitar is definitely new and different. It has a really cool butterscotch finish, which is reminiscent of what you would find on a 52 reissue Telecaster, for example. And you know, they are taking the influences of that, as well as the black pickguard, which is commonly found on a 52 reissue, but of course the shape of the pickguard is completely different. The shape of the body is similar to maybe the shape of a Jaguar guitar, or maybe close to what they've launched in their Pawn Shop series not too long ago, but it is different. It's not exactly the same layout. Definitely seems comfortable and cool. It does have the tummy tuck. It does have the armrest cut out there. Looks futurish. Looks like something you would see out of the Jetsons or something like that in terms of body shape. So it's basically a combination of a Telecaster, Jazzmaster, and maybe some Jaguar influences, in my opinion. So it's very angular, and again, it's going to be cool. Why? Because they are going to be introducing this in a nitrocellulose lacquer, which I love, which I think is a great choice. It has an ash body, which it's always been very popular with people who like Telecasters. The butterscotch finish, obviously, the butterscotch finish is going to be something that's going to be very popular for people that do like the classic influences. Now, the black block inlays, that's something that I think people are going to have to get used to. I think it's the type of thing where either you love it or you hate it. Now, where does that come from? It comes from what you've seen on a Jazzmaster bass. So if any of you like Rush and have seen the Jazzmaster bass that Geddy Lee plays, he has the black block inlays, and they've taken those inlays and put it onto this model. I think it works well because you have a lot of black on the body because of the pickguard, and it kind of gives you that black influence that goes up the neck. So it's not extremely ugly or anything like that. I think it works, but it's just a little different than what we're used to seeing from Fender. But to me, it definitely works. Now, it's going to have a C profile that is going to be very similar to the American Vintage 65 Jazzmaster. So for those of you who like that type of a profile, you will definitely like this one. And the headstock does have the Deluxe standard staggered tuners. So the Deluxe staggered tuners will make it a lot easier, you know, to do to keep the guitar in tune. It has a bone nut. It has the gold spaghetti logo, the thin logo for the Fender decal on it, which I do like a lot better than the thicker black one that is commonly seen on the guitars that are made in Mexico. So, you know, it looks like it's going to be pretty killer. Now, if we look at the layout in terms of the switches and the knobs, it's pretty standard to anything you would see on a Telecaster. It's got a volume and a tone and a three-way switch. Now the switch is located somewhere where you can get to it quite easily. I like the fact that it's angled, and that's going to definitely work better on the guitar than a typical Telecaster angle switch would work, because the Telecasters, if you're familiar with Telecaster at all, they're pretty much parallel with the ground, and when you're trying to switch it, it's not a very natural way to switch a toggle. This one has a little angle to it, which I think will work better. The pickups on this guitar are going to be custom shop vintage style Telecaster in the bridge and a custom shop twisted tele single coil in the neck. So they're going to be killer pickups. I don't have any qualms about that. I think the guitar is going to sound very, very much like a Telecaster. Now the guitar also has compensated brass saddles on it and a bone nut. So the brass saddles are typical to what we see on like a 52 reissue Telecaster. Of course, people are always going to be complaining that you can't, it's a little bit harder to configure the guitar when you're dealing with setting up the bridge and keeping the bridge intonated with a 3-saddle brass bridge is always a little bit of a challenge, but I think that Fender was aiming to go retro on this one. It would have been cool to maybe offer this model with a different type of a bridge, maybe a 6-saddle, independent adjustment bridge would be cool. But I do understand why they're going for this type of a bridge. They do want to keep that Telecaster tone there. And what's also interesting, if we look at the picture, is that on the bridge you do have a little bit of a plate there that is a good place to rest the palm. Will it get in the way when you're doing palm mutes? That we will have to see. But it looks like it's thin enough that it wouldn't necessarily interfere, but yet give you the comfort of being able to rest your palm somewhere. And it also looks to me like they've removed the side walls on the top and the bottom of that bridge plate that used to get in the way. So that's really nice to see that they got rid of that. And I'm pretty sure that this guitar will still be a string through design as a typical Telecaster would. And I think a lot of people like that fact. So for those of you who are definitely into that Telecaster twang, but maybe looking for something a little bit more modern looking, something a little bit more comfortable, definitely check out this guitar. One other aspect of this guitar that sets it apart is that it does have a limited edition micro tilt neck plate on it, and that's something that we don't see very often as well. And of course, as I mentioned, all of these guitars are limited edition. I don't know how long they will be offered, but they will be limited. As far as price goes, the Meteora, as far as information that I've come across, is listed at $15.99, and that's pounds. That's not US dollars or Canadian dollars, that's pounds. Now I believe that's the suggested manufacturer resale price, so it will probably be a little bit less than that when it actually hits the stores, but you can pretty much be sure that they will be pretty expensive. I mean, the prices are getting up there for all of the guitars, including the new Fender lines, so they won't be cheap, but you'll definitely have something pretty cool and unique when it comes to an axe, as opposed to maybe what your friends are playing with the traditional Strats and Telecasters and Jaguars and whatnot. So definitely a great place to look for new designs on guitars. And I think it's a sign of the times. People like Fender, people like Ibanez, and a lot of other companies are constantly launching new products, and I think this new Fender line will be killer. So overall, I think that this leaked information has worked well in Fender's favor, because they've actually started a little buzz ahead of time and have gotten people excited about what's coming down the line. Kind of like what Apple does when they kind of leak information on purpose ahead of the game when they're launching a new product, to stir up excitement and to keep people from maybe buying something else in the meantime when they're waiting for the product to actually be launched. So we know it's coming on very soon. 2018 for sure. In the winter, it's going to be launched officially, and I'm sure it will be at your local music store shortly thereafter. So if you like any of these guitars and you want to get one, save your pennies, guys, because they'll be at the store soon. I think Fender has done an outstanding job of introducing some new products. I'm hoping that they will play and you know, sound as nice as they look. Of course, the prices are a little steep, but there again, everybody's getting more expensive these days. It comes with the territory, unfortunately. And I'm curious to see where these guitars are actually going to be made. If they're going to be a USA run, you know, a Mexican run, overseas run. It hasn't been clearly stipulated exactly where they're going to be made. So we have to stay tuned for that. But I see good things coming down the pipe for Fender, and I think they're going to have a very interesting launch with these new line of guitars. And I want to know what you think. Let me know if you like them, if you think they're hideous, or if you really, you know, maybe would like to actually purchase one of these guitars when they're launched. Give your comments below. I'm always pretty interested in hearing what you guys have to say. You always have an excellent point of view, and just leave your comments down below and we can discuss as a group and see where this new product line from Fender ends up, you know, if it ends up hitting the mark or not. In the meantime, guys, thank you once again for subscribing and staying tuned to me on this channel. It means the world to me, and I think you're going to be very pleased with some upcoming news and information as more information trickles out from NAMM. We're going to have a lot of great products to talk about, and hopefully I'll get my hands on a lot of these new products this year, and we'll be able to review them in person right here and on Addicted to Gear. So if you haven't already subscribed, please do, or you'll be missing a lot of this great information as it becomes available. Stay tuned and keep rocking, guys.